Welcome to State of Ed, a podcast about education inside the classroom and out. My name is Mark Isix.
And I'm Nick Simone.
How you doing today, Nick?
I'm doing well, Mark. You having a nice vacation?
I'm having a very nice vacation, very relaxing. I know most people who don't teach or who are not in education hate to hear this, but it was well deserved and definitely earned. I know that they can't understand that, but if you are not in the business, you can't possibly understand it.
Well, we'll have a nice stretch in March and April to make up for it.
Yeah, absolutely. How's your break?
Oh, pretty good. Just trying to catch up on some paperwork in school and relax a little bit as well.
Very nice. And one of the luxuries and nice things about having a break is that I get to catch up on a few movies. And I got to see The Martian with the Matt Damon. And I know you haven't seen it, but there was a part. I don't want to give really too much away, but there's a part where the basic premise is that he gets stranded on Mars, and he has to try to stay alive in an inhospitable place. Um, Sort of analogous to teaching in certain schools around the country, and basically the one of the themes or one of the morals of that comes out of this story is how when you're faced with problems you have to think and problem solve and find answers and find solutions, and it sort of boils down to something really that simple. And as I'm watching that and hearing that being said, I couldn't help but think about education. And as you know, our district is in the middle of trying to make a move into one to one technology and tablets, perhaps for our students and for our teachers to integrate into the classroom. And I know we've had this discussion before about technology, so I don't want to necessarily retread over that path again. But it really does boil down to changing the way we approach education and turning it into exactly what was discussed in the film, which is when you're faced with problems, you have to learn how to problem solve and find solutions and move forward. And that's really what life has become, maybe more than ever. I know it's an oversimplification, but life in the 21st century is really all about having problem solving skills. As far as I see it, there's no difference between learning those problem solving skills in math or in science or in health or in ELA and writing an essay. And it's all one and the same. It's part and parcel of a big picture. And I think if whatever we decide as a district, and I know a lot of districts around the country are either going through this or have recently gone through this decision making process. And it really comes down to how we approach education. And it's not even a matter of the device so much as how we utilize the device.
Well, I do think that a lot of the reforms that have been put in place, they talk about encouraging kids to become problem solvers, analytical thinkers, critical analysis. So I feel like the lip service is there, but I'm not sure if the execution or the follow through uh, in the classroom is taking place. So when you talk about the movie being, symbolic of problem solving, I think we're trying to do that, but I don't think we're all succeeding just yet.
Oh no, no, we definitely not all
Right.
succeeding, and it's not, and that's just not even in the classroom level. That's on a much larger scale. That's on the building scale. It's on the central administration scale. It's on the county and state scale. In many cases, we can even argue it's on the federal scale. Um, Common Core is trying to take some steps in that direction, but doesn't go far enough, in my opinion, in terms of big picture and getting everyone on board with the big picture. And as we've discussed over the weeks and months, um, we're getting so lost in some of the minutia and the arguments that are ensuing that we are losing a focus of something bigger. And I think that's one of the detriments of how this botched implementation has left us in this really awful position nationally.
Yeah, but I would say if you want to get to a point where the work in the classroom is really focused on those skills that you're discussing, I think part of the obstacle is that we're still using a schedule. I mean, I know that all schools throughout the country do have different schedules, but so many of us are still on a typical 8, 9 period bell schedule, 45 minutes. And I think you have to really dramatically change the layout of the day in order to fully implement teaching strategies that are going to encourage the skills you want, developed, that we both want developed.
Right. Well, I agree with that, and I'm
Yeah.
all in favor of finding progressive ways to manage time. One of the major obstacles right off the bat is dealing with contracts that are very much fixed and bound to traditional models, and it's not even a matter of changing hearts and minds, but you have to change legal documentation on top of that, and that becomes very difficult, especially the tenor in buildings and in districts now, given everything that's transpired over the last few years, is so tenuous that it's hard to get buy-in from the masses that you need in order to shape these types of changes that you're thinking about and talking about.
Yeah, but although I would argue that great work could be done on both sides to come up with a plan that satisfies the teachers, the unions, and administration and board of ed if we weren't spending so much time crunching numbers on test scores that are completely irrelevant. If you really think about the amount of time that's put into all of that data, that in my opinion serves no purpose, and you really put together a revamped schedule and layout of the 7 hour school day, I think you'd see a lot of progress. And I'm sure everybody feels that way throughout the country.
I agree. I would love to see that, but unfortunately, we've moved completely in the opposite direction, and we've doubled down on testing, and despite all the rhetoric now of trying to cut the testing time, and we'll go into that a little bit more with the new changes that have been announced in New York State. But um, I just we're still in the middle of revamping APPR and trying to find ways to create bottom line ratings for a system that cannot be deduced or reduced to a single bottom line just because of the nature of what we do. So I agree with you. I'd love to see that. I would be very much in favor of it, but and I do think that some assessment is important and proper just to keep a certain level of accountability in place. But at the same time, it would be nice to be freed from those shackles of assessments and testing so we can get to the business of really teaching kids how to think and how to learn. Speaking of environments in which children are expected to learn, you've seen the video, which is I'm assuming has gone viral at this point, of the first grade charter school teacher in Brooklyn
I most certainly
disciplining
did. Yes.
disciplining her math student.
I most certainly did. Although I
For
shouldn't be
those of us for
laughing.
for those listeners who haven't seen it, and we'll put a link to it, of course, in the show notes. But can you just give us a Reader's Digest synopsis of what happened?
Well, when I saw the headline, and I think a few people had sent me links, I was expecting a far different classroom atmosphere than what I what I encountered. It appeared to me that there were incredibly well behaved first graders sitting in some form of a circle or a semicircle. I actually don't know if I've ever seen first graders that well behaved on video before. And it was the teacher just berating a child, I guess for, was it getting the question incorrect or not going through the proper steps?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I guess the teaching assistant took a photo of it.
Video, yeah.
I'm sorry, video, yeah. But I don't, I haven't heard much follow up since then. I thought it would, I'm sure, like I said, it's gone viral, but I'm wondering if it's going to get more attention, nationally. It's despicable. I should point that out. It's just horrific behavior
Well, and
on the teacher's part.
yeah, well, you left out two important pieces. One is the teacher ripped the student's paper that contained the work, and then told the student to sit in the calm down chair, was it called? Or
Yeah,
the
I think so.
I don't even I don't even know what it was called. Something like a calm down chair, which is, I guess, since they can't do the dunce corner anymore like they did when we were going to school with the dunce cap, and they don't do timeout chairs anymore. I guess it's the calm down chair now. They've as George Carlin is probably rolling over in his grave as we keep finding more and more euphemisms for the same old things. But uh, yeah, so the teacher berated the first grader and then ripped her paper and then sent her to the calm down chair. But she was about as calm as I've ever seen a 6-year old be. So I don't know how much calmer she expected her to get, but so I know you said despicable, but what leads to that, and how do we handle that type of behavior on behalf of adults in classrooms?
Well, see, my concern is that if this was just caught on video one time, what goes on day to day? Now, if you want to tell me that the teacher had a momentary lapse in judgment, uh, the reason I can't buy that is because the kids were so well behaved. They were
Hmm.
sitting there so calmly. So I think that the frustration that I saw on the teacher's part is probably indicative of what the classroom is like on a day to day basis.
Yeah, listen, I wasn't there, you weren't there,
That's true. Yeah.
but let's be real. I mean, the odds that this assistant teacher, just of all days that they happen to be recording with his or her phone, and they happen to catch this moment, which was allegedly the only time that something like this has ever happened. I don't buy that for a second. I think this is how the teacher handles certain situations. This teacher gets stressed. There's a lot of pressure, especially in the charter schools, to get certain types of results. And the job protections in the charter schools are non-existent, especially relative to the public schools where there's tenure. So there's additional pressure there, and I just in my heart don't believe for a second that this was an anomaly and this was a once in a lifetime outburst. And we all have gotten to the end, kind of the end of our rope in a classroom, and we've all felt pressure and stress in a classroom. But that's when the adult has to be the adult, and that's when the professional has to be the professional, and not get to that point, despite your what might be immense frustrations. She may have taught that lesson 15 times and may have told that kid 100 times how to answer the problem correctly, but that still doesn't justify the ripping of the paper and the calm down chair and the tirade. And it just this it's so awful and so despicable, like you said, and very disheartening.
Yeah. Well, both neither of us are elementary school teachers, and I know you've had your children go through the system, and I have many friends with kids in elementary school. And I think after I watched it, what concerned me is when I hear from my friends their frustration at what elementary school has become. And the emphasis on testing and the academic nature is great. But there is something to be said about socialization. There is something to be said about developing a love of learning.
Hmm.
And if kids are, at 6, 7, 8 years old, I mean, kindergarten kids coming home with homework every night in kindergarten. And some of I mean, I saw a friend of mine whose child in first grade had like a subject verb agreement homework in
In
first
first grade.
grade. There are AP kids that don't know subject verb
Oh
agreement right
my God,
now.
that's insane.
So that's really what went through my mind is, and again, neither of us can speak directly to it because we're not in an elementary environment. But I'm so worried about what we're going to see come up in the next couple of years if elementary school has truly just become a just a academic exclusive environment where there is no time for kids to learn to socialize, learn to, like you say, problem solve, figure things out, have certain playtimes. I mean, there's all these stories about recess being cut or completely eliminated, the arts being eliminated. That's what went through my mind. I just went to like step after step after step of what it must be like to be in elementary school today.
You know, when I was watching this video, I couldn't help but think about my sister's elementary school teacher, who was a very sick, disturbed individual, and she actually put plastic bags over the kids' heads when they
Oof.
misbehaved. And I mean, talk about talk about tenure being a problem. She never lost her job, unbelievably, after after doing that for a number of years. Just a very sick, disturbed individual, and I know a number of kids in that class developed fears of going to school, and you can understand why. And I couldn't help when I was watching this video of this charter school that imagine how traumatized a kid, a 6 year old, a 7 year old must have been or must continue to be because I think this woman's still teaching when these types of outbursts and this type of treatment goes on, and how are we supposed to instill a lifelong desire to learn when failure or not not living up to a certain academic expectation is met with such a horrific response. I can't rationalize it. And we've all been there. We've all been frustrated. We've all trying to find a harder surface to bang our head against because we just don't we can't understand why the message isn't getting across. But that's a time to count to 10 and circle the wagons and try to figure out another way to get something across. But you just can't let that type of anger and frustration get into your classroom and destroy the environment that you're hopefully attempting to create.
Oh, absolutely. And to go back to your original question, I mean, I'm sure that the administration, dealt with it in an appropriate manner, um,
I would hope.
and that that people will learn from their mistakes. So I have to be optimistic in that front. But I just look at the bigger picture of the stress level that's being placed on so many people in the elementary schools.
Yeah, but I gotta say, if you look at the article that accompanied the video in the Times, it basically said it had the administrator of that building talking about how wonderful the teacher is and how this is something that doesn't happen, and but yet it did happen. Um, it just sounded like they were covering, to be honest, and so I don't know. I wish I had confidence that it was handled appropriately, but I guess just from the limited information that I got from the article, I don't have that sense of confidence.
Yeah. Well,
And
it's
not to
just
mention, you can't unring the bell. I mean, so let's say the teacher goes into the next day and apologizes to the kids, but that doesn't that doesn't remedy anything. They've already experienced that. They've already been traumatized, and if we're right, and that's not the first time that that type of behavior or misbehavior has gone on, how much have they been exposed to already, and how much has that impacted them? I mean, talk about impressionable youth. Is a 6 or 7 year old? Is there a more impressionable group?
no, you're right. But at the same time, it's done, and you hope that they move forward in a positive way, and that more people uh, learn from that horrific decision by the teacher.
So, so if someone's listening to this, and let's say they're a neophyte teacher, and or even a seasoned teacher, and they are experiencing this type of frustration, so what kind of advice would you give them so they can avoid kind of lashing out like this and using these kinds of draconian methods or measures?
Yeah, I think you have to provide, as a teacher, you have to provide constant reminders in your world, in your setting, that kids are, that they're going to make mistakes, that they're going to be frustrating to people at times, so that you don't lash out when in your own life you're feeling this, added level of stress. One of my friends actually sent me one of those memes the other day, and it basically said, "Remember, the kids who need the most love will ask for it in the most unloving ways."
Hmm.
And so you
I
put
like that.
something like, and it's so true. So you put something like that either on your desk or on your phone, or so you're constantly reminded that they are kids and they're going to make mistakes and they're going to frustrate you, but you have to uh, respond appropriately. So something like that, that's really the best advice. And even with that, teachers are going to have their bad moments. There's no question. Um, but I would hope that a first grade teacher with a perfectly behaved class would not have one of those moments.
Agreed. Agreed. So I know that you had watched something on PBS. I think it was a documentary. Can you just share a little bit about that with
Yeah,
us?
totally changing gears. No, it was just the PBS NewsHour with Gwen Ifill, and I must have gotten a an update on Twitter or an announcement about it that they were doing. I guess they do a weekly segment on education throughout the country, and they were doing one on internet access in Mississippi, and they went to a rural school where the internet access was minimal. If they did have it, it was barely operational, and incredibly expensive. And they tried to talk to the internet providers about assisting them, and they were really not receptive at all. So then they went to Oxford, Mississippi, which is a college town, which is only 30 miles away. And the video from that school, I mean, it looked like a beautiful school, and they had the internet. They had the laptop carts. Everybody had a MacBook.
Hmm.
The teachers were doing all these hands-on activities, and they interviewed them and said, "No, internet high speed is never a problem in our school. Kids can access it all the time." So as I'm watching it, it just yet again reminds me. We talk about New York and the inequality. It's everywhere. The different states have some areas that have the greatest resources and the greatest technology, and other places that are languishing. And somehow we're supposed to compare everybody, and everybody's supposed to get the same results. But then the part that I'm going to use in my class, which I really thought was interesting, is apparently the FCC decided to offer money to the rural school district and help them to build their own fiber lines. Is that the correct terminology, by the way? You're the tech guy.
That sounds good. We'll
Okay,
go with
good.
that. Just in absence of maybe what's the right answer.
What's the correct one? And and ironically, as soon as that happened, the private company said, "Oh, we can come in and probably lower the cost for you."
Wow.
So it's an interesting, government regulation, deregulation argument that a real life application. But more importantly, it's just another reminder of just how incredibly unequal our educational environments are.
So what's the solution there? Because the federal government does provide funding, some funding, arguably relatively limited, but at least some funding for education. Um, States, by and large, do provide email addresses and some type of funding for technology. I know New York just launched a very substantial grant to try to increase and improve technology in New York school districts. So, I guess to their credit, they are trying to pump some money into the system to try to resolve those types of inequalities. But, how do we get there faster? Because, every year is another lost opportunity for the kids who move through the system.
The only way I can answer that is not being not being involved in any budgetary process at all. I just have to believe that our money can be allocated better. That's really all I can say. And I mean that from the federal level and the state level. I don't mean that on the local level. I just think there has to be a more efficient way because we spend a lot of money. We spend far more than most countries, if not every country, and we're not getting the same result.
So
And we're not bridging that gap at all. But the
maybe where Common Core missed the mark is that perhaps they should have set certain bars and made created certain federal mandates for internet access, for ratios of, students to computers or tablets or some type of computer devices. um maybe a little bit more emphasis should have been placed there instead of trying to get into the minutia or the nitty-gritty of curriculum development. Although that's, certainly has its benefits, but maybe to level the playing field there. It wouldn't be the first time that the federal government mandated something and didn't fund it properly. So since they have a good history of that, why not just continue? At least try to set the bar as close to equal in terms of access to technology across the board and across the country. So counties like, the ones in Mississippi would have to allocate money, or the state would have to allocate money to those districts in order to meet the federal mandate. Um, and that could have been a way to move capital to where it's needed, as opposed to waiting for it to sort of trickle down.
you're slowly walking into the territory that gets me quite mad, and that when you talk about curriculum development, uh, Mark, curriculum development is going to do nothing to solve the problem in our inner city schools. Curriculum development is going to do nothing to level the playing field in rural America. It absolutely will do nothing.
Why do you
That
feel
is
that way?
not because we have a whole host of pedagogical experts that don't have any idea how to reach very troubled youth and very poor youth and very angry youth. They wouldn't have any idea how to connect them. They think that if you put together some module, it's going to be the great elixir to fix everything.
Yeah, and if
And
they
it
don't get it right, you just rip the paper up. That's how you do it.
I, but I can't even. I get so frustrated by it because how many more stories do we have to read about, and I think I say this to you all the time, about 18, 19, 20, 20 and 21-year-olds in communities all over this country who are being arrested. And I say all the time, these are kids that sat in our schools. These are kids that sat in our educational environments. And what did we do for them? We did nothing because they think that pedagogy is going to fix everything. And it doesn't work that way. But I do believe that if you create, now this is where sometimes my students do disagree with me, but if we build schools that are really nice places for kids to come to every day, and they have great technology and they're comfortable and they're nice to be in, I think you might have a better chance of more kids actually wanting to do well there and maybe take better ownership in their buildings. But we send so many kids to schools that are decrepit, that are falling apart, that are outdated, and we wonder why they don't take it seriously. We don't take it seriously.
Right. Well, you're getting to the heart of what was behind Governor Cuomo's 2% tax cap, in part, right? Because there was a certain frustration and anger that he felt. Now, we have to go back to put ourselves back into the Great Recession times, when teachers were vilified as the great blood-sucking vermin of society, who were, taking these fat cat very low, very high five-figure, very low six-figure salaries, and and essentially stealing from communities, which is such a abomination. But everyone was suffering, except for of course, the wealthiest. But um, so Cuomo decided to put a cap, so money would have to be, I guess, better allocated and more wisely allocated, and people and districts couldn't just continue to squander money on what he thought were, excessive salaries for veteran teachers and administrators and central administrators, and who were making more than he was earning as governor. And that was one way to sort of not only exact revenge, uh, but try to rein in excessive spending. And so there was a very small amount of truth in what he was trying to get at, which is there is a ton of misallocated money in school districts that is wasted. And if it were to be better used or utilized, then you could have a little bit more of the equity that you're talking about. Um, Obviously, it's just one step. It's a first step. You need a lot more resources, especially in inner city schools, to really level the playing field. But so there was a little bit of that in what he was trying to accomplish, because truth be told, and you know as well as I do, that there are misallocated funds and programs that go nowhere, and that tons of money or dumped into, or new reading programs, new math programs, new this, new that, and then they're completely jettisoned 2 or 3 years later for something else, and all that money literally goes to waste and sits in a closet somewhere collecting dust, and all the training that went along with it, and that sort of just goes up in smoke also. So I guess that's where I come back to those mandates, and where No Child Left Behind and every student succeeds, where perhaps they could have made better, and Common Core, they could have made better headway into solving the problem of equity or lack thereof by creating not curriculum benchmarks, but technology benchmarks, um, access benchmarks, and the types of schools and environments that you're talking about. Make those the requirements, and then build out from there, as opposed to starting with the module one of first grade math.
Well, I'll give you one example, and I unfortunately don't have statistics to fully defend myself, but I would love to know how much money the federal government spends on grants to students to go to college who never graduate. And the reason why they don't graduate is because they don't have the academic foundation to do so. And they don't, because our schools are not preparing kids well enough to be successful. So why would you put all that money into community college grants, Pell Grants, and everything, and have kids fail? Because we know that the rates of graduation are horrific. Why not put that money into the high schools, the middle schools, and have kids actually have the foundation so they can be successful when they get to college? That would just be one example, if you don't want to raise taxes, of where the money can be reassigned, so to speak.
I think it's a very, very valid argument. I definitely don't know the numbers. I'm sure the numbers are massive, um, but it's a problem. It's a problem, and you're right. If you don't establish early on that love of learning, that desire to want to become that problem solver, um, and you don't build that into the fabric of what the school experience and the school environment is like, then you can't possibly you can't possibly rely on that just magically happening to students, and sort of picking up on or developing that feeling later on. It's uh it's and that's one of the reasons why you see the graduation rate so low.
We haven't spoken in a while, so I feel a little bit passionate this this session. Uh, I look at I feel as if that there are like three classes of students. There are those students who are so unbelievably highly motivated and disciplined and well behaved that anybody can get in front of them and teach them. Anybody can't teach them well, but anybody can teach them. Okay. Then you have the large bulk of students who need to be motivated. We have students who are all across the spectrum intellectually and ability wise, but they need a kick in the butt, and they need a teacher who's really going to be inspirational, animated, hands on.
Hmm.
And I think that, but then we have to face the reality. We have kids whose problems are so severe at home that they are coming into these buildings completely not prepared.
Right.
And I don't know if there's anything we can do to get them to those other levels. We can try, but we have to understand that those students, If we can give them a meal in school every day, a breakfast and lunch, if we can give them a nice environment to come to, and if we can give them job skills and we can give them the ability to lead productive lives and break the cycle of poverty that might exist in their family, that's a success. And it doesn't mean that they may never pass an assessment. They may, and they don't need to,
Right.
because I don't know if that should be the goal. But because we're making that the goal for everybody, it creates more problems.
Right.
And I really do. I feel very strongly about that, because we keep talking about the same problems and nobody's really doing anything to resolve them.
Well, you made a very wonderful argument a couple of episodes ago where you were talking about multiple pathways and you were talking about uh, funding additional clinicians in schools, especially middle schools and high schools, to try to address the very problems that you're discussing right now. And again, that's where we talk about reallocating money, not wasting money on other things. Where start with the fundamentals, start with the foundations. In many schools where it's needed and where communities are a lot more unstable than perhaps more wealthy communities in suburban areas where there's a greater level of stability or likelihood of stability in the household, um, and dedicate resources to helping individuals and not just redesigning curriculum. And that will go a lot further than, like you said, creating that new module. It's difficult. Ideally, you'd like to have money to do everything. That would be the perfect solution, but we
Right.
don't have all the money in the world to do all these different things. So that's why it's even more important that money not be wasted and resources not be misutilized.
Yeah. Well, maybe we should try to. Be great if we can get a couple of guests together from some of these, communities that are struggling.
Hmm.
Because we're not from that. We're from schools, that do have resources, and,
Hmm.
and we don't really lack of money. So I mean, like you said, we always wish we had more, but
Right.
I'd love to hear from some of the teachers who are working in these places that are just dealing with obstacles that we're not aware of.
So let's transition. Since I did mention the state a few minutes ago and Cuomo, so now the newest development from New York State Office of Assessments is that the third grade through eighth grade assessments this spring are going to be untimed. So for those who are not from New York State, we typically have had those assessments each year for math and ELA and for science, and they have been over the course of 3 days, typically, especially for ELA and math, and they have been anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes in duration. I don't, maybe a little bit more in some cases for certain parts, but right around that general time frame. And now we have moved from a time test to an untimed test. So what's your reaction to that?
Well, first of all, that's official.
That is official.
This is official.
The
I
memo that
guess
explains how we're supposed to do that hasn't yet come out, but the
so.
official change has taken place.
Well, I absolutely understand what they're thinking is. They're trying to do everything that they can to break the opt out movement. And I guess their thought process was, if there's no stress on the kids to finish in time, that maybe that will allow more parents to send their kids to school.
Right.
I don't think they're going to achieve their intended goal, though. I don't think it's the length of the test that was troubling to most of the parents
Right.
who are out there.
Oh,
If
and
you're
they are
asking my
eliminating some questions, by the way. I forgot that part as well.
and there, I mean, if you're asking me my philosophical, response to it, maybe it would have been nicer in the younger grades, maybe third, fourth, and fifth, to have it untimed. I don't really see the tremendous difference that it's going to serve in the older grades.
Now you see, as the person who is administering the tests or organizing the administration of the test, I immediately start. My brain goes in a completely different direction, and I just start thinking logistical nightmares.
Right.
Um, in terms of I always try to create the optimal testing environment for students because I believe they deserve it and they should be free from distractions and they should be comfortable and they should be in the same space for the duration of the test and I just feel like in order to pull this off when we're not in an elementary school setting where we don't just have the one classroom with the one teacher essentially, uh, especially us, we're in a 7 through 12 and we're going to want to, we typically do a delayed opening. So and when the tests are done, everybody comes back in and we run a day, an abridged day, but still a full day of instruction. And so how to best meet the needs of all the students from grades 7 through 12 is logistically challenging while still trying to preserve the testing environment that each kid deserves. So logistically speaking, I'm eager yet not eager to return to return to work and try to figure out exactly how we're going to make this happen in about 6 weeks.
Yeah, I mean that. I mean, we're we're in the small minority with that problem of being a junior senior high school. But even without that, if you're sitting in an elementary classroom, what does it say to a student who is working for 4 hours when you have other kids that have finished in 45 minutes
Oh, forget
or
the
an
peer
hour?
pressure is going to be off
Right.
the charts.
Yeah. Or, so how does that actually help? So there's no there's no right answer to it. I'd like to think that their intentions were, you know, were strong, were good, but it's not going to play out well at all
What's
until
interesting, another interesting wrinkle is students with disabilities very frequently get additional time as a testing
right.
modification. So, in a way, this eliminates that testing modification, and it, you can really look at it from two different perspectives. Um, one is that it's a good thing that the students without that modification have additional time, but yet at the same time, the students who have those mods now, in a sense, have lost a little bit of one of the equalizers, uh, in terms of their disability in comparison to the students without the disability. Um, so it's kind of an interesting angle to it.
I do think it's better to have it untimed than timed for the younger grades. But if everybody's not taking the test, then these tests can't be used to evaluate anything anyway. So they're and they're not going to get people to show up. It's not going to make a difference.
Yeah,
So whether you like or dislike the opt-out movement, this is not going to solve that problem.
yeah. You know what the opt out movement reminds me of? It's like in the Wizard of Oz when I guess was it the dog Toto that pulls back the curtain and you see all the mechanisms and the levers and everything moving back and forth, and it just destroyed the illusion of the wizard. And I feel like with the Common Core changes and the opt out movement and now the time changes, it's forever destroyed the illusion of the great test and the test that is a good test and a necessary test. I feel it's done forever now. I mean, how are we ever going to go back to a state test? At least let's just take New York State. How are we ever going back to a state test and putting Humpty Dumpty back together again, so to speak, and recreating the illusion that that test is a proper assessment of learning and understanding for an entire year? How are we ever restoring that kind of faith in that assessment?
See, maybe I'm too idealistic. I do believe you can do it very simply by not publishing any results in the newspaper and by not using it to evaluate teachers. I my friends who ask me, should I opt out, should I not opt out? I say to them, the test is not the problem. It's the build up to the test that's destroying your child's education. There is nothing wrong with taking an exam to assess and evaluate what your child knows. But if the entire year is dedicated to nothing but test prep, that's the problem. So I understand why these people opt out, but opting out per se is not helping your child. Your child has already gone through the damaging part of the year. As a matter of fact, opting out may, in some ways, harm because now you're sending a message to your kid: if you don't want to do something, don't do it. It's very complicated. I respect all sides of the argument, but I always contend that the most damaging aspect of this is what is being done in the classroom because of the emphasis placed on the test. And I've said this so many times to you. We took tests all throughout elementary school. Our idea of a test was you come to school one day, they gave you a pencil, and they said, take a test. There was no build up. There was no preparation. We had to read the directions on our own. We didn't have booklets. We didn't have workbooks. None of that. I mean, we had booklets and workbooks, but not created specifically to prepare for a test.
Right.
We walked into school one day, and then 6 weeks later, our parents got the results in the mail, told us what percentile we were in, and that was it. And we were perfectly fine. And if we went back to that, oh, go ahead. You seem to want to interject.
No, I really agree with everything you're saying. And that sort of furthers my point that when we got that letter and it said you're reading at the such and such percentile or a such and such grade level, and then that determined your placement for the upcoming year and what class you were going to be in, there was validity because there was faith that that was a fair assessment. And I know I'm maybe glorifying the past a little bit. I'm sure there was some resistance and some grumblings on a low level, but on a small scale. But by and large, people, parents, the community, the school, the teachers, the principal, all perception, at least that I had at that time, was that this was a perfectly legitimate assessment, and the results of the assessment were perfectly legitimate as well, and warranted or validated a student's placement in the upcoming year. Not that there was all the pressure, not that there was all the buildup and everything else, but at least there was faith that there was something in place that would make that determination and in a fair way. But all that is gone now. That's what I'm saying. So what will replace that, and how will that ever come back? Because right now we're sort of in this world where everybody can sort of argue against every single thing, where people now want to opt out of everything. They want to shape their child's experience to their own individual needs or tastes or wants or desires, as opposed to having sort of a unified method of doing something. And it's all because people have lost their faith in these types of assessments because of how they've been botched so badly. So that's my question. How do we get that back? Because we still are part of a system. We still are part of a massive system. And big systems have to have things in place that help maintain them and help run them. So I just think we're a really interesting inflection point in the history of education.
On that note,
Are you going to cop out and not respond to that at all?
on that note, I think I did respond. I believe that we can get back to using tests the right way. I believe we can go back to those years where the test was given, there was no emphasis on it as a build-up, and it was used to evaluate appropriately, not in the newspaper to compare apples and oranges, and not when thousands of kids are not taking the test. I just believe we can get back to that point, as long as you don't make them, because as soon as you make them public, and as soon as you use them for comparison, human nature will direct teachers to teach to the test. Case closed.
So I'll leave you with a historical comparison. So back in the Depression times when people were making their runs on the bank and the panics were setting in, something was needed to restore faith in the banking system because the banking system was of utmost importance, just like the education system is of utmost importance. So the New Deal created that thing. It created the FDIC and it created additional regulation in order to restore faith. So, what is going to be that thing that's going to be created to restore people's faith in the education system where there must be faith?
So you want like a Glass-Steagall for education reform?
Well,
Is
I
that what you're
love
looking for?
Glass-Steagall. I'm partial to Glass-Steagall. Maybe my favorite legislation of all time.
All right, I have no answer to that though.
Okay, we'll leave that.
Nothing can equate with Glass-Steagall. Sorry.
All right. Well, I mean, Glass-Steagall's not the worst place to leave off on a podcast, though. If you would like to follow us on the web, you can do so at stateofedpodcast.com. You could also ask a question or suggest a topic at ask@stateofedpodcast.com. That's our email. You can also find links to what we discussed on our show notes, which of course is on the web as well. We're also on Twitter, and we have not really kept up with our New Year's resolution to do more tweeting, so we're remiss there. But that's at SOE Podcast. And of course, we're in the iTunes store, so you can subscribe to us there and leave a comment if you'd like. And that sums up our show. It's been a while. I apologize, but we finally got our act together and we're able to knock one out. So, Nick, a pleasure as always.
Same here, Mark. Take care and good luck with your first day back to school.
And you lost the bet because I have not made a single Hamilton reference until right now. So I don't know how much we wagered, but whatever it is, I expect a check in the mail.
Good, and good luck with your latest venture into the lottery.
Thank you. You as well.
Take care.
Have a good one.